Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, ladies and gentlemen. Good day to all of you, and thank you very much for joining. And for those who are watching this maybe later on YouTube, I hope you also enjoy it. So basically, this is going to be a talk about recent findings on the geological and archaeological investigation in Rub Al Khali, on the Omani side of the Rub Al Khali. And I will start to introduce the team, and also Maria Pia will also introduce herself and also part of the work. So we are going to present here about 40 slides of the work that we've conducted in 2019 and 2020 in the area, and I'll be sharing the slides with you, which will take about 35 to 40 minutes, and then this will be followed by 10 minutes of questions and answers. So I'll share the slide pack with you, and you would see that here we will have the first presentation. Pia, can you see the first slide?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, very good. So the title of the talk is Geology and Archaeology of the Southern Rub Al Khali, Dhofar Governorate, as per the administrative, subdivision of Oman. And my name is Mohammed Al Kindi. I work in the Earth Sciences Consultancy Center. I was kind of leading this team, and it was supported by the, at then it was called the Ministry of Culture and Heritage, but now it's called the Ministry of Heritage and Tourism, following a recent royal decree. And this presentation is held by both the National Museum and the Geological Society of Oman. So thank you very much to both of them for their invitation and for their efforts to organize the talk. So myself, Mohammed, I work currently in the Earth Sciences Consultancy Center. I'm a visiting lecturer in the German University of Technology in Oman. I sometimes also teach in the Sultan Qaboos University. I'm a geologist by background, structural geologist. I've obtained my bachelor from Aberdeen University in the UK, my PhD in Leeds University. My interest is is quite variable. It goes from structural geology mainly, but I also do some work in cave speleothems, and I also do some, I published a few papers on fossils, the fauna, fossil fauna in Oman. And I'll probably say a few words about Maria Pia. Maria is actually just finished her PhD, waiting to defend it very soon. She's done great work studying the Asian, African, Mediterranean studies, and she's part of the University of Naples, and she's very interested in the Neolithic of Oman, and she has done a very thorough study on the systematic study of the projectile points, which is related to the Neolithic, specifically in Arabia, and probably more specific in Oman. And she's studied various models of the cultural change during the early and middle Holocene. Maybe, Pia, you want to add more points?
No, thank you. I think you said almost everything. I'm an archaeologist and interested in generally in the prehistory and early history of Arabian, but as you said, in particular in Oman. And I'm specializing now my studies, especially on projectile points. So yes, I will let you begin.
Okay, very good. and she's already published actually a number of papers as a first author or a joint author. Very good papers of the Neolithic, if people are interested to read this. And by the way, for our Arabic participants, I might sometimes say a few words just to explain some terminology. So when we say the Neolithic, in Arabic it's the Al-Asr al-Hajari al-Hadith. Here, by the way, on this top right corner of this slide, I don't know if you can see the mouse pointer. Can you see it here?
No.
Okay, so anyway, on the top right corner of this slide, you will see a general picture of Arabia. So our area is located on the southern part of Rub Al Khali, and Rub Al Khali is just a massive sand body which extends for, I don't know, for 1,000 by 500 kilometer. So it actually is more than 500, probably more than 600,000 square kilometers. And our area is located around a place called Maitan, which is actually part of a small, a border city called Al-Mazyuna. And Al-Mazyuna, it basically sits exactly on the border between Oman and Yemen. And Maitan is to the north of that city. It's part of the city. And so the area is actually on the triple junction border junction between Oman, Yemen, and Saudi Arabia. I'm moving to the second slide. This is our excellent team. We had a number of geologists and archaeologists in our team members. I'll just go introduce them very quickly for their excellent work, as I said, in January 2019 and in January 2020. We have Jeremy here, Vos, and we have Dr. Vincent Charpentier, myself, Mohammed Al-Kindi, Maria Pia, Dominic Gomri, and we have Ahmed Qatan, who's a geologist from Petroleum Development Oman. We have Grigor Marchand from France, and he's an archaeologist. We have Ali Al-Mahri from the Ministry of Heritage and Tourism, and he is archaeologist as well. We have here Federico Borgi, and he's a surveyor, but with a lot of experience actually in archaeology. And Dr. Martin Pickford, has a wide experience in geology and fossils, and he works in the National Museum in Paris. And then we have here our excellent member, Saeed Al-Harazi from Maitan, actually, who was an extreme support for our team. That's why I actually included a separate slide to introduce Saeed. And Saeed, actually, when he joined, we went to this area. I personally went there with Ahmed Khatan back, I think, in 2018. And Saeed and his father joined us in the area, and they were attracted to the millstones and grindstones and the other big artifacts that they saw in the area. So when we visited the area, we saw hundreds, probably thousands of projectiles and lithic tools scattered on the area. And from there on, we contacted the French team, so Maria Pia, Dr. Vincent Charpentier, and other archaeologists, excellent archaeologists. And then we set up a team in 2019 with the support of the ministry to go and visit the area. And it actually led to very good finding. So many thanks to Saeed. And Saeed, by now, he has very good experience actually in finding a lot of these tools and finding new sites. So he will continue to be a great support for us. For the ministry, I would like to thank His Excellency Salim Mahrouqi, now the Minister of Heritage and Tourism, Mr. Sultan Al-Bakri, Mr. Ali Al-Mahri from the Directorate of Dhofar, Mr. Khamis Al-Asmi from the Department of Excavation and Archaeological Studies, and Mrs. Sumaya Al-Busaidi. So thank you very much for your excellent support in this work. A bit about the area here. So we said that Maitan is a small village located on the northern side of the city of Mazyuna. The village is close to the triple border junction, as I mentioned, between Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and Oman, as you see here. And being located in this area, it's actually highly monitored and inspected by the military. So for people who want to visit the area, they need to bear that in mind, and they should not visit the area without informing the local people, local governor of the area as well. And the military has to know about it as well, and they need to have certificates, at least from the ministry, to avoid any hassles. The area is in overall full of massive sand dunes. In fact, these are the kind of the highest sand dunes in Rub Al Khali, and they stand probably about 200 meters or slightly less from the ground. They're different in shapes. A lot of them are kind of star shape. A lot of them are linear in shape. In the beginning, they start kind of random shape, and as we go more inside into this massive sand body, they get more kind of linear. And the ground between the sand dunes is basically covered by hard grounds, sand, consolidated sand sometimes, or semi-consolidated sand, gypsum, lakes. It's a really beautiful area, but again, it needs a lot of care, and people need to be accompanied. There should be more than one car, because there is possibility of getting stuck, as well as there is a need to have permission to visit the area. But the area is really has a high dense of archaeological artifacts. There's a huge concentration of various artifacts in some of these locations. As a geologist, I'm speaking. Maybe the archaeologists would have a different perspective, but I was amazed actually with the amount of archaeological leftovers or artifacts in this area. And these are specially placed in the evaporites, the Aeolianite, the hard Aeolian. In Arabic, let me just explain this. في يعني قطع أثرية كثيرة جدا موجودة في الأماكن بين الكثبان الرملية الهائلة هذه في منطقة ميتن، في شمال منطقة ميتن. And you would see that in this area there would be loads of bifacial tools. You will see stone hammers. You will see several grinding stones, polished stones, loads of things that Maria Pia will take you through them. And they often, I'll just go back to this slide, I forgot one point here. They often call them uruq or urq. And urq in Arabic is the name of singular name of linear sand dunes. We call it urq, okay? And it's actually a technical term nowadays used. And uruq is the plural of that term. So basically a number of linear sand dunes. So the area is actually divided to urq and uruq, which is linear sand dunes. And it is called urq jidela and urq sh'aid, okay, and or shaqqat jidela and sh'aid or shaq sh'aid. So these are the names which are given to this place. If we go to the next slide, so I'm going to introduce now a bit about the geology, the climate and fauna in the area. As I said, there is shaq sh'aid and shaqqat jidela. Shaq is more or less the area between the uruq, between the urq. So basically, shaq is the interdunal area, the area between the sand dunes. And you would see here that we have in the beginning here this site, shaqqat jidela 1 to 9, which has a huge dense artifacts. Is the most prospective area in the whole site, or in the whole area. And we have also shaq sh'aid, which also has a number of isolated sites. And if I go to the next slide, this is just another picture of shaqqat jidela. And in shaqqat jidela, you would see loads of sites. So each of these sites from 1 to 9 is an archaeological site that we inspected, and we found various tools within them. Now this area here is, I don't know, maybe 3 kilometers, looking at the scale now, by 3 kilometers or so. So it's quite large actually. And within this depression or bowl, you will see a lot of white patches, and these white patches are basically gypsum, يعني ترسبات من الجبس. So gypsum mounds, and you will see sometimes evaporite flats, you know, and a lot of the surrounding areas of these gypsum mounds and flats have a lot of archaeological sites. So it's very likely that these gypsum mounds are actually ancient springs, and what supports that is the fact that we have sometimes tufa deposits, in Arabic ترسبات الينابيع. So it looks like that these areas were actually possible lakes or springs, ancient springs. And Rub Al Khali is known to have deposits of ancient springs some 6,000 years ago and more. So and there would be loads. And what is interesting here is that not only we have the archaeological spots or where people probably have lived, but we also have the workshops. And Pia would speak about this more when it comes to her part. If we move to the next slide, this is an aerial photo by drone. You see one beautiful gypsum mound here. And on the right side, you will see a small gypsum mound. And so the white patch, basically, that you see in these two pictures. And these gypsum mounds are what I highlighted before to be possible ancient mounds or spring mounds. And around them, there would be hard calcareous tufa, ترسبات الينابيع. And some of them would have impressions of, for example, plant roots or stems. They would have a lot of, in this specific one, we have a lot of ostrich eggs scattered around the area. Sometimes you have gypsum crystals, what's so-called sand roses. So that again supports the fact that these are possibly ancient. All of these evidence support the fact that these are ancient mounds. We have ornaments, we have fauna around them as well. Quite impressive, actually. The next slide is about the stratigraphy. In Arabic, تتابع الطبقات الموجودة هنا. So what we have here, we try to estimate the age of these using various references. We have the sand dunes on top, then we have the hard ground. The white area here is, so the bottom of this stratigraphic column is the limestone with the flint nodules. You will see the flint nodules on the right-hand side of this slide. And they're quite pure, actually. That's why they were excellent to make lithic tools. That's the impression I had from our team of archaeologists. And these are Eocene in age. And Eocene, that would be probably, roughly speaking, 50 million years ago. And they're very thick, obviously, very clean limestone, good limestone. And on top of them, we will have Miocene, so I don't know, probably around 15 million years ago or so, fluvial deposits, and then we have hard or semi-consolidated dune sands on top, the playa deposit, gypsum and silt on top, and this would have a lot of artifacts, and probably this would date to late Pleistocene to Holocene. So these are more or less the wet periods or the pluvial periods in Arabic, الفترات المطيرة في عهد الهولocene. So these are also very rich in actually lithics on top of them, and then we have the calcareous tufa, and then the more recent or post-Neolithic deposits of unconsolidated sand and mobile sand on top of them. So the area is actually stratigraphically very interesting, and there should be probably more work done on this area from that perspective. If I move to the next slide, this is a really beautiful slide or a summary that was done by Vincent here in 2008, and it gives basically an overview of the cultural entities, let's say, if I'm using the right terminology or the right term here, cultural entities during the, let's say, the Neolithic with the chronology of the various tools. So the archaeologists have specified various periods from various sites, and hopefully this what you call representation here would be actually modified after our work in Maitan. So there are areas where we had hunter-gatherers in Oman about 8,000 to 7,500 BC or so. And so that is basically the early Holocene. And then we have basically what do you call it? The technology has evolved over time so that various facies in a period called hyper-arid, according to this, probably 6,500 BC, okay, and where other points facies has appeared during this period. Anyway, it's an interesting figure that I just wanted to show, and Pia obviously will speak more about this since she's done her PhD on the Neolithic tools. And this is a quick graph from various resources showing the most pluvial periods during the last, say, 350,000 years ago. فترات المطيرة في 350,000 سنة السابقة, and you can see that there are at least 5 of them. The latest one was during the late Paleolithic and the Neolithic, following the end of the Pleistocene and the beginning of the Holocene. This is a more kind of advanced figure, and it shows the from a paper published in 2017. And here you would see that the main message here, to keep it brief since we also have limited time, the main message here is that let's say from around 6,000 years ago, there is a significant and beyond, of course, significant reduction in the precipitation, rain precipitation. So that has been noticed from various latitudes, as you see here on the right side of the figure. So say from 5,000 years before present, there has been dramatic lowering of water bodies in southern Arabia. And that obviously had led to the area to change from being kind of green to arid or to desert-like. And you can see that in the next figure. This is just a quick overview of Arabia during the pluvial period, okay, and Arabia during an arid period. الجزيرة العربية في الفترات المطيرة والجزيرة العربية في الفترات الجافة. Obviously, this could be any pluvial period, and this could be any arid period. And in this case, you would see that a lot of the Rub Al Khali would have been green. Maybe the sand bodies wouldn't be as mobile as during the arid periods, especially during the glacial period, where things are changed into deserts, and it becomes, let's say, less attractive for human to live, and maybe humans their population would be restricted in that case, and migration of people would be limited. Whereas when Arabia was green and there is more rain, people would have probably moved across Arabia more, and they would have found a lot of the desert plains today in Arabia to be very attractive for living. So these are just an overview of some of the fossils that we found in the area. A lot of bivalves, and these have been used as ornaments. You would see mollusks on the left side. So they've brought some marine mollusks to the site, and they probably have actually created their own ornaments in the site. You can see on the right-hand side small marine snails and marine shells on the left side. Different types. We've published a paper about this. And by the way, there are at least 3 publications which are either published or on the pipeline to be published, hopefully within this year, from this research, as well as we're hoping to make a book under the Ministry of Heritage and Tourism about our work in this area. The second slide, again, various bivalves that have been used as ornaments, and you would see on the right hand side beads that have been created from various shells, or in the middle one, right middle, you would see actually a fossil urchin. In Arabic, قنفذ البحر, أحفورة قنفذ البحر, has been selected by these people to create a bead, apparently. So they've actually selectively chosen fossils, and they've done exactly the same thing with what do you call it, ostrich egg fossils. You know, they've selected the fossils that have been already, you know, been weathered by the wind to create their beads. So they selected their you know, their raw material for their ornaments. And you in the left, sorry, the right bottom, you see here a fragment of bivalve that apparently has been used as an ornament as well. And these are some of the ostrich eggs on the top left. You would see that they've been already weathered. You can see that when they started to make this, what do you call it, holes within them, they've actually perforated some of the weathered parts, hollows within these. So it shows that they selected the fossils, the hard eggshells, in order to make their ornaments. And again, you see fossil eggshell fragments in the area, you know, that are scattered around these spring mounds. On the left bottom, you would see here bead shapers, and that tells us that people in Macon, or in this area in the past, they've actually manufactured their own, possibly manufactured their own, what do you call it, ornaments or tools in the site. Again, you will see here various bones. You see here Chelonian fossil, and here you see lagomorph remains. Here you see small corvid remains. So again, all these fossils are published in our paper. And here you see a comparison between the extant or the present goat and sheep in Oman and the Neolithic goats from Shaqqa Jidela, from the site we've done and we've inspected. And you would see that in general, the Neolithic specimens are clearly smaller than the range of variation which is found in Oman goats and sheep today. Okay, I'll leave the platform now to Pia.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you for the presentation and description on the geological and the environmental context, and this rich introduction also on the fossil remains. I will move now on the strictly archaeological side of the presentation. As presented by Mohammed, when we undertook the systematic survey of the area north of the desert village of Mitan, we followed the guidance of Said and the reports from local people who found several lithic tools in these places. Okay. Next. Most of our surveying efforts were focused in the interdunal areas, both Shaqqa Jadila and Shaq Shait, but today I will focus my presentation on the former, the most articulated and rich in terms of diversity, variety, and preservation of the archaeological assemblage. Next.
Okay.
Please, Mohammed. All the surveyed sites have undergone strong deflection. The action of strong winds eroded most of the deposit, leaving the archaeological material entirely exposed on the surface. However, most of the sites appear consistent in their archaeological assemblage. Next. Most of the prehistoric sites are located on the gypsiferous surfaces, linked to water bodies. No remnants from the lower and middle Paleolithic were found in the area, but such sites are numerous in the Nejd Plateau, just a few dozen kilometers far. Next. These are usually distributed around clusters of mortars and grinding stones. Our survey was focused around the whole depression of Shaqqa Jadila that was entirely surveyed on foot, and around 10 sites were recorded. Next. Apart from mortars, pestles, and grinding stones on the top left, made in limestone, we recorded large bifacial foliates, which are really numerous, especially on the first recorded site, ostrich eggshell fragments, bead and bead preforms, an incredibly high number of projectile points ranging in size and shape and realized with different manufacture techniques, and ornaments made in allochthonous red stone, marine shells, and the urchin fossil. Next. After a preliminary spatial registration of the main spots and the collection of selected diagnostic material, we registered the artifacts and we analyzed the technology and the methodology applied to manufacture the bifaces, the arrowheads, and all the flint remains collected in the area. I want to specify that we often prefer the term projectile points to the simple arrowhead because it's more comprehensive. In fact, it includes both arrows and dart points. First, I want to introduce the lithic assemblage of SQJ8, and this is located behind the large dune, and it is significantly different from the others in terms of point, tools, and debitage products. It is characterized by debitage and wastes associated with unidirectional cores. Bladelets that are shown in the pictures show traces of direct and indirect percussion, and the patina, that is this thin layer that covers the lithic remains, especially when exposed on the surface to weathering forces. Here, in these cases, is significantly thicker than the others, and you can see it also in this picture, where the bifaces look more glossy than the bladelets under them. This element, together with the technological study that associate this group of items with the one in Facade, which is a site 100 kilometers far, led us to interpret this site as older than the others and probably dated to the 9th or the 8th millennium BC. Next. In just 2 weeks of fieldwork, around 400 points were counted from the main sites. This huge number of arrowheads was initially described and classified on the field, and then analyzed in the framework of my PhD project. The study and classification of such group of points, together with the context, made it possible to define a preliminary chronology. Next. Okay, this first group comprises the trihedral points that symbolically represent the beginning of the Middle Neolithic, a period that ranges between the 7th and the 5th millennium BC. And as a guide fossil for this period in the whole region, these projectiles with the triangular, very fine section exhibit a considerable stylistic and technological diversity, and they represent the highest peak of arrowhead production in Arabia. Next. The point called trihedral with ergot and concord are extremely, they belong to the same family, to the same group of the trihedral points, so they always have a triangular or plano-convex section, but they are enriched with extremely fine details, as small lateral sort of ears in the former, and the finest, incredibly thin and perforating tip in the second. Next. We also have other classes of arrowheads as the willow leaf-shaped points that are on the right, and winged and shouldered points that achieved their peak of diffusion during the late Neolithic, between the 5th and the 4th millennium BC. These last two groups have been found literally everywhere in Arabia, and they outlined what in the 80s was defined as the Arabian bifacial tradition, which, however, does not represent a specific element of cultural identity. Next. Together with the bladelet-oriented assemblage that I described previously, two types of point have been identified. First, the simple facade point, with a small stem produced by direct steep retouch, and the tip that is characterized by the natural convergence of the blade of the blank edges, and the same kind of point with partially retouched apical part that might represent an attempt to regularize unpointed blanks. These facade points are dated between the 9th and the 7th millennium BC. And the recent studies argued that they could have been produced by hunter-gatherers of the early Holocene, or what is might be called the pre-Neolithic period. The passage between the late Paleolithic and the rise of Neolithic is still unclear and really difficult to identify. However, population continuity is a possible answer if we consider the importance of climatic refugia and material cultural stability that are partly detectable in the lithic industries. Next. Most of the Middle Neolithic and Late Neolithic tools were produced using the pressure technique that involves the usage of an organic stick to detach precise and regular flakes. This process makes it possible to obtain fine, symmetric, and regular artifacts. Today, we know that the trihedral point were widely diffused in Oman, in UAE, and in the Yemeni islands, and seem completely absent from Qatar and the northwestern shores of the Gulf. Next. For the production of such arrowheads, highly skilled knappers start to apply the fluting and the parallel covering retouch. We do not have the time, and this is not the venue to explain these processes in detail, but both techniques were extremely complex, and they were applied only in southern and southeastern Arabia from the 6th millennium BC. Next. Well, known as axe heads or head scrapers, a considerable number of these tools were identified for the first time in Oman, together with dozens of scraping tools. Use-wear analyses are planned for the next season. Until now, we were not able to make them. But head scrapers are comparable with similar items recovered in Eastern Sahara, but also in Western Rub Al Khali, especially in desert areas as Jabrin, Mutaibtat, and Ramlat al-Sabatain in Yemen. It is still not really possible to define the precise usage for these tools, but they were most likely used in the processing of animal hides or woodworking. Next. Tethering stones were made out of local limestone, and they show the presence of a well-arranged central gorge made by picking and hammering. These elements have been found always isolated and rarely in pairs. They are also known as Ben Barur, and they have been interpreted as trapping stones, especially on the basis of rock art engravings that were discovered in Sahara. Next. Well, now it's time to discuss a bit the chronological context to which this archaeological assemblage belongs. The Neolithic, also called the New Stone Age, is generally identified by the spread of stone tools shaped by polishing or grinding, settlement in permanent villages. Next. The diffusion of domesticated plants and animals. And next. Transformation of food and the appearance of such crafts as pottery. During that time, humans learned how to raise crops and keep domestic livestock, and were thus no longer dependent on hunting, fishing, and gathering wild plants. Next. But should we consider the Neolithic as indicated merely by the association of sedentism, ceramics, farming, and agriculture? Many cases have already demonstrated that the variability and non-linearity of these associations. In archaeological terms, the division between hunter-gatherers, who were small-scale producers, and fully Neolithized population is not always neat. Clearly different from that of the Levant, the Neolithization of southern Arabia has followed its own path. In the 6th and 5th millennium BC, the Neolithic here is characterized by the complete absence of agriculture, which only becomes certain in the early Bronze Age, and then around 3000 years BC. While domesticated cattle and goat were introduced into southern Arabia, most likely by small groups of herders from 6000 years BC. Next. The climatic history of southeastern Arabian regions, but also the whole peninsula, has always been utilized as a cardinal base for our studies. To summarize, an important humid climate phase began during the early Holocene, around the 8th millennium BC, and ran through the middle Holocene with periods of instability that made large areas of the desert livable and rich of scattered water bodies. This phase ended around the beginning of the 4th millennium BC, when the climate became more arid and similar to the present time. And this picture that was made by Said during the cyclone Mekonu is really representative of how heavy rains can transform this landscape. Next slide, please. To sum up, we can say that the scarcity of beads, except for the 12 made on ostrich eggshells, and the apparent absence of drills and perforators led us to speculate that these ornaments arrived complete to the site, especially from the coast, as demonstrated by the collected worked and unworked shells. Limestone and sandstone macro tools are often grouped in 2 or 3 specimens, and the hammer used for flint knapping are often made out of flint pebbles or recycled cores, and grinding objects show a sort of standardization. We cannot say more on these grinding slabs because we discovered them just last winter, and microanalysis of traces and remains are planned for the next season. Next. We can then imagine the population of Shaka Jadila as made of small groups of hunter-gatherers and probably first herders, enriching their diets with small game and wild plants, collected in steppe environment. Due to the scarcity of prehistoric sites detected in the Rub Al Khali, it is important to proceed with research in this area, going through use-wear analysis, excavation, and test trenches. The area around Ramlat Jadila constitutes an important resource for the comprehension of both Pleistocene and Holocene aspects of the Southern Arabian prehistory. Next. Both the assemblage of Shaka Jadila and Shak Shait are associated with a significant number of marine shells, as we said before. Whether they are worked or not, their presence highlights how intense were the exchanges with the coastal area that is more than 300 kilometers far from these sites. The worked shells show very close connection with specimens found in the coastal Neolithic sites like Sharbethat, Suea, and Ras Al Had. Moving to the technological aspect, both parallel covering retouch and fluting technology were used to produce the same kind of arrowheads, showing cultural affinity, with several other sites in interior and coastal Dhofar and the Yemeni Hadramaut. Furthermore, arrowheads from Shaka Jadila show the same high technical investment as the one from Sharbethat, that is far around 500 kilometers, although slight differences are still visible in the final products. Several elements seem to connect this area also to other places in Arabian Peninsula, as the western Saudi Desert, like in Mutabtat, the eastern fringes of Rub Al Khali as Al Jahar and Coral Manahil, but the strongest similarities emerge with the site of Al Hawa 17 in Yemen. Next and last, To complete this brief excursus on the archaeological assemblage of this desert site, we will present the discovery of a small greenstone axe. It was discovered on the surface in the area between two main agglomerations of lithic remains, and the absence of usual traces cancelled by weathering, and also the scarcity of similar tools in the archaeological assemblages made it difficult to hypothesize the function of this axe. But with Mohammed, we will show you now the first results we got from analyzing this object and other artifacts collected in Oman and Yemen.
Thank you very much, Pia. So basically, again, as Pia said, yes, one of the very good, nice finding actually from the area was to pick up this beautiful green stone. And we managed to identify from the site that this would be most likely nephrite or jadeite. And it was really very interesting to find this, and it did seem to be belonging to the Neolithic. So that actually opened for us a whole research about this object. Maybe slightly in Arabic, هذا الحجر يعتبر من الأحجار الكريمة، ويعني يسمى أظن بالعربي اليشم، وكان يعني مميز جدا أن نعثر عليه في صخور في منطقة تعود للعصر الحجري الحديث. So basically what we did after that, we've done a lot of survey about all these tools that have been found in Oman before, and also actually in adjacent areas. We wanted to understand the distribution of these tools. We wanted to understand the origin of them. We wanted to understand the periods they would probably been used. And one of the things I remember doing actually was tweeting about it. And luckily, one of the gentlemen from Dhofar contacted me, and he said that his grandmother picked one actually, similar tool from one of the wadis. I think it was in Jebel Samhan, or specifically in Taqa, the wilayat of Taqa. And we had the second one. And then we were lucky that Alexia, she contacted us and to analyze some of the other specimens, similar specimens that we picked up from Samahram and Khururi in Dhofar. So we analyzed some of these tools, and we did what's so-called micro Raman spectra. And we did that in an institute called the Gulf Institute of Geology, GIG, and it's located in Lukhwer in Muscat. So they've kindly actually supported this research by analyzing all these tools, and it turned out that they are quite identical in terms of raw material. And they basically, what do you call it, nephrite, identified as nephrite, and their reference bands are kind of pure nephrite, thermolite and actinolite nephrite. And we actually were provided with a raw material from Yemen of similar, rock or gemstone, let's say, that has been mined from Yemen, and we analyzed it, and it turned out to be also have identical raw material as the nephrite we found in Shaqqa Jadila, as well as all the other nephrite specimens that we actually found stored or owned by people from Dhofar. It was very interesting, actually. And we then also managed to take pictures and some analysis of the nephrite specimen that were picked by Wilfred Thesiger back in the 1940s. And Alan Heward supported us to take these pictures and some measurements. So there were two actually samples that were picked by Wilfred Thesiger. I think in here this would be specimen probably 6 and 7 most likely. And Wilfred found one in a small village called Mudai, and he was handed one in Salalah by one of the people in Dhofar. So we also included this in the analysis, and we also found other specimens published, or we found them stored actually in a museum near London, and these were picked by Gertrude Thompson. She bought them, or they were bought from Horaida in Yemen. I think it was back in the 1940s as well. And we also compared some of this stuff to the snake-shaped nephrite artifact with decoration of, as you see here, of snakes. So we did some research, and we're actually publishing this hopefully in the next 2 months. And here there is a figure that shows basically all this nephrite distribution that were found in Oman. By the way, we don't know, and we couldn't find any nephrite deposits here in Oman with a similar, let's say, composition. So we think these are coming most likely from Yemen, mined from the basement rocks in volcanic rocks in Yemen, and specifically that the raw nephrite that we actually were handed from Yemen had exactly the same composition. So this is very interesting because it shows that there was long distance exchange back in the Neolithic that has crossed hundreds or even thousands of kilometers in South Arabia at least, and the research on this is new. However, it will require several more surveys and excavations in this area to kind of fix the chronology of this technology and the production of it. So it's big importance to extend our knowledge of this technological development in the Middle Neolithic of Southern Arabia. So now going to the next slide, maybe I'll just go through the first point and then Pia can cover the next one. So this has been very helpful. The work that we've done in the area is to try to understand expand our knowledge specifically about the Neolithic and the interaction of the Neolithic between in South Arabia, including Yemen, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. Maybe, Pia, you can then cover the next points.
Yes, the addition of this new data, both from the pre-Neolithic and Neolithic periods, from these inland sites, and especially in this part of the Rub Al Khali that was never explored before, is really important to the general comprehension of our knowledge on the prehistory of Oman. And also it is important to proceed with the survey and the analysis, both on the assemblages, but also with the survey in the surroundings, because we know that other sites are present as facade that, as I said before, it's 100 kilometers far, and we are sure that there are several other spots that just wait to be discovered. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. This was our last slide, and thank for all the teams and institutes that joined in this research. So maybe we'll switch now, Pia, to see if there are any questions. I was actually looking now on YouTube, and I couldn't find any. There are many comments, but I couldn't locate any question actually. Yeah, one person here, Salim, was mentioning that I should stay idle so that the voice does not fade out. Sorry for this, Salim. I just saw the message. Yeah, I don't see any question actually. So, hopefully you found this talk interesting.
Yeah.
And
hopefully we can. To all the friends, colleagues, and that are following us and listening to the presentation, and thanks to Mohammed for creating with the National Museum and the Geological Society this event. It was really nice to see each other after so many months.
Yes. So stay safe, everyone. Specific thanks to Zahra from the National Museum for her support. Thank you very much, and also to Abdul Mun'im for his excellent support actually. And thank you very much, Pia.
Thank you too.
Thanks.